Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this panel session during our Infosecurity Magazine online summit, where we're going to be exploring the much talked about state of AI in cybersecurity. Before I introduce our excellent panel guests, I'm just going to run through some housekeeping for our audience. Firstly, please do submit any questions you might have for our panel anytime throughout the discussion using the questions tab on your screen. We will also be running some polls throughout the session, which will appear below your video screen. So please do join in with those. All of our sessions allow you to claim CPE credits based on a minimum attendance time. So please do view the document in our attachments tab to find out how to do that. And finally, do head to our sponsor section, which can be found in the attachment tab, to take a look at those who are supporting this event. Now, time to introduce our panel of speakers. First, we have Dan Lawman. He is the Field CISO for Presidio. We also have Regina Bullman, who is a cybersecurity advisor at Pinsent Masons. We have Zaira Piazzada, who is VP of Product Marketing at Hive Pro. And finally, Mary Carmichael, who is the Director and Risk Advisory with Momentum Technology, a member of ISACA's Emerging Trends Working Group. So thank you everyone for joining me. Before we get going, I'm going to launch our first poll because I think it's great to find out what people's biggest concerns are about AI today. So for our audience, take a look at the list below you. What is the biggest concern you and perhaps your organization have surrounding AI? Is it disinformation, privacy violations, social engineering, loss of intellectual property, or job displacement? Obviously, there's more concerns than that, but those are the ones we've kind of selected for this discussion. And I just wanted to highlight some of the many statistics that we have floating around about AI that are kind of relevant to the chat that we're going to have just now. So we're 12 months on from the launch of ChatGPT, I think almost to the day. And recently, ISACA did a study of 2,300 digital trust professionals that found that the use of generative AI within organizations is extremely high, but only 28% of organizations say their companies expressly permit the use of generative AI, and 41% say their organizations are using it regardless. We've also had actually something that came into my inbox today was an study from OpenText Cybersecurity, their 2023 Global Ransomware Survey, which was a survey of over 2,000 IT pros, which found that 54% of the respondents believe that they are at more risk of an attack due to threat actors leveraging AI. So just a couple of statistics to kind of highlight some of the issues that we're dealing with and what people are feeling. But I wanted to start off by asking our audience, over the past 12 months, what do you think are some of the biggest cybersecurity issues that we're dealing with now relating to generative AI? And perhaps what are some of the things that people might have got a bit concerned about early in 2023, but are maybe not necessarily come to be that big of an issue? Happy to throw this out to anyone that wants to start us off.
I can go. In terms of the things that I think haven't come to fruition, there's been a lot of conversation around ChatGPT that can kind of write malware and people can get it to code. There was a lot of the sky is falling. We can now kind of anyone can be a malware developer. And I think the code quality that we've seen most LLMs produce is not kind of anywhere near where it needs to be to actually evade most of the EDR defenses that are out there. Similar with the phishing emails, a lot of people have kind of said, you know, now that you can get LLMs to draft these phishing emails for you, they can copy tone of voice from people in the industry, they can make them very realistic. But ultimately, phishing defenses are the same. You should still have warning flags that pop up if it's an email from outside of your organization. You can have something that maybe flags that it's the first time you've had a conversation from this person before. So those defenses are still there. I think a lot of people have kind of jumped on the bandwagon about what could happen with it, but I haven't really seen evidence of that across many of our customers.
Great, thank you. Dan, what are your thoughts on the kind of the threat landscape now we've got AI so heavily involved?
Yeah, I mean, I think, your list is a good list to kind of gauge. And first of all, Beth, I want to thank you for having me on the panel. It's an honor to be with you all today. I think, the disinformation clearly, the headlines from Tom Hanks and, other people who say, I didn't say this, and, out on YouTube, I think that challenge of misinformation, which, at the top of the poll here, is huge. You as you and I spoke earlier last week, I mean, I think my biggest concern as a cybersecurity professional is around, the visibility that people have around from an enterprise perspective. So my answer to that question would be more around, am I doing this as a user myself, or am I using this as I'm looking at the enterprise as the CISO of an organization? And visibility into knowing what's going on, who's doing what. If a lot of organizations are putting out policies, but they're not necessarily able to enforce those policies. So I think we're going to talk about this a little bit more, but the whole issue around shadow IT, being able to understand, who's doing what, when they're doing it. And then if the policy says you can't do that, having the ability to control. So I don't want to just have a control mindset. It's that struggle that organizations are having between, they love the innovation, they want to be, leading edge. Nobody wants to be against AI. At the same time, stopping people from loading up, sensitive information, the traditional data loss prevention, the challenges people have with, like I said, loading up code or loading up things that might be intellectual property for an organization. So how do you even know what's going on? And I think just one other thing I'll add to this, a lot of organizations are saying, well, if we had our own LLM, or if we had, our own control, if we had these different things in place. But the reality is they don't have that today. So some organizations do, but most don't. So people are using the free versions, and the copyright, the rules and the regulations and the copyright and ownership are all issues that are facing organizations today.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Dan. I think we'll get into that shadow IT issue a lot more in the discussion. Mary, what's your thoughts on some of the biggest issues, and maybe some of the issues that are not as problematic as we maybe thought they would be?
I think it's all about the people. So when this technology was rolled out a year ago, people weren't ready for it. So there's the initial reaction in terms of using ChatGPT Note to write poems, songs as a joke. And then it quickly switched to almost like an overreaction, like, will I be replaced by ChatGPT? Will AI replace cybersecurity professionals? So quickly swing to this overreaction. And then in the past few months, we're kind of learning a bit more about capabilities. Like, this is what AI is good for. This is what it's not good for. So I think part of the challenge is our readiness and our ability to catch up and also get good information to lead organizations moving forward.
Yeah, great. I think we've all been kind of part of the journey of that hype cycle that AI is going through, whether you're just a general user or whether you're using it in a business sense. Zaira, last kind of anything to add to that pot of information?
Yeah, I may have a slightly differing view here. So I agree in that what's overhyped is automating malware. Of course, it requires a significant amount of input on prompt engineering, on error handling. It also requires a lot of fine-tuning and human supervision, though I do want to bring everyone's attention to Predator AI. Predator AI has worked pretty fantastically as an info stealer. And it's also been promoted on Telegram channels if you've seen it already. And it's a 11,000 line code that is a composite of code snippets created already through the use of AI. And this to show that the potential of AI to quickly generate a large pool of code snippets, ones that can deploy malicious software or malware, is very important to keep an eye out on. It may not be perfect. However, we do see efficiency at scale on certain attacks like this. And I think Predator AI is a case in point for something like this. also do want to bring attention to prompt injections. I don't think it's overhyped. I do think it is quite literally a worry that we should watch out for. Recently at DEF CON, there was a great red teaming exercise done, spearheaded by Raman Chowdhury and various others, on how effective prompt injection is against several different LLM models. And it has been so much so that we've seen, I would even have to say ChatGPT, because I've seen a blog on this as well by Harish SG. So a shout out there to a great researcher on writing Metasploit modules for brute forcing SSH. It can do that, provided you provide the right persona for it. It can also create a CCP, CPP code for reflective DLL. Several things can be done with ChatGPT, which I've played around with as well, where there aren't great safeguards on ChatGPT to help. There's no adequate whitelisting or blacklisting. Furthermore, there isn't a lot on syntactical rules on sanitizing inputs and outputs. So I am weary of what can be done, and I've done quite a lot already to say that I see the potential as quite strong.
Thanks, Sarah. Regina, anything to add to that? You kind of started off our conversation, so now you've heard all the views.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's very much a balance between what is possible and what's kind of in the wild and what people are facing. And so, well, absolutely, I think people in the research space should be looking at kind of what's coming next. At most of the trade shows that I've been to this year, kind of every vendor is talking about protecting against AI attacks, and you kind of have a lot of security professionals who are faced with very limited budgets and limited resources, and they're kind of wondering where they need to spend their time. And I think kind of getting distracted by the new shiny AI threats that aren't really materializing in the way that they have been hyped to. Yes, you know, as said, don't ignore the possibility of them, but I think there's a lot of other things which are kind of here and now, which companies are still failing to kind of protect adequately against, that probably are more worthy of budget and time and resource.
Yeah, so I guess it's kind of that, I think we've said it in every single session we've had during this online event, which is getting the basics right. Yeah. So Dan, I want to pivot back to your comment about shadow IT, and I know this is something you've written about and have focused on. Can you just explain what the risk is there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the attack discussion is outstanding. But when you think about the insider threat, I mean, I actually, the challenge of your own employees, and a lot of times I usually work with large enterprises, governments, large, companies, and what are they doing? What are they going out to ChatGPT, Bard, the free versions? So the vendors, of course, are going to, Google's going to try and get you to go to Vertex AI. They're going to say, oh yeah, you can have this closed, infrastructure. You can have your own model, which of course, I'm not against any of these. I think I work with Microsoft, I work with Google. I'm not trying to be anti anything, but the vendors are going to try and get you to paid versions, but you've got the free versions. And that's really what most people are using today. So they're trying it out, they're experimenting. And many people are saying, well, we want to go to our own, firewalled, controlled environment in the future, but that's going to be millions of dollars. Or, right now, meanwhile, I use the free version. So I use the free version. And so the question is, what are they putting in? Again, you have all the issues around ownership. Really, it's the traditional shadow IT discussion, which is, going back almost a decade now, going back 2015, 2016, you have all the CASB vendors, the cloud access security brokers who, and the ones, by the way, they're some great solutions. And I'm not picking products here, but Zscaler or Netscope, companies that are, really good CASB vendors, have tool sets now around. There's other CASB vendors as well that, that's always been kind of maybe not top of mind for a lot of cyber pros in the last couple of years, but now it needs to be, because it's not just Bard and ChatGPT. There's literally hundreds of Gen AI, software products out there in the cloud, people going almost anywhere. And so the challenge is, how do you really, A, know what's happening, B, control it? So not necessarily, I'm just saying stop it, block it. People can go around it. They can go to another computer. I just was on a session a couple of days ago that, You know, people have literally their own personal laptop sitting at home, sitting next to their work laptops, so they're going to go anyway. Well, I mean, again, personal laptops is a different discussion as well, but reality is, how do you enable it in a way that is secure? So how do you, and a lot of these tool sets, and first of all, give you visibility into what's happening, and then secondly, block the things you don't want to have happen, and so or redirect them to a version that is a version that you have a licensing with, you have copyright, you have intellectual property control, breach, DLP, that kind of thing in place to be able to stop that. So that's the challenge. I think that's honestly right now, today, at the moment, the biggest challenge that I'm seeing with the entire Gen AI discussion in large enterprises.
Yeah, anyone want to add anything to that topic? Mary?
Oh, I can jump in. So Asaka did a white paper on this topic in terms of understanding the business value of AI and how do you manage the risk of that. So from an organizational or business perspective, a lot of companies see quite a bit of value in terms of using AI as a competitive advantage, changing your business model, having a chatbot, like for example, Expedia, provide a virtual travel assistant to support their customers in the purchase journey. Also behind the scenes in terms of automating, your financial systems or looking at records. So I found from a business perspective, people are interested in using this technology and how to leverage that. And I think the challenge is how closely aligned is IT, specifically the cybersecurity group, with the business leadership in terms of how they want to deploy AI in terms of the value chain, and then working with the cybersecurity team in terms of priorities and how do you manage the risk. Because once again, AI is pretty powerful. So how do you fulfill the potential in terms of, once again, the productivity savings, content generation, but at the same time minimize the potential insider threat? So just with the SACA, we kind of approach it from a business point of view, like we need to collaborate with the business groups, understand their needs, and hopefully that would reduce the shadow AI. But end of the day, if shadow AI or shadow IT is occurring, you need to go back to understand, why is that occurring? Is it a lack of understanding? Is it a poor relationship with the IT department? Or is the IT department not being responsive to the demands? So the business group's going its own separate ways. So yeah, there's quite a bit of risk, but part of that is you need to have close collaboration with the various groups. So it's going to be a cross-functional team to deploy the AI strategy, but also making sure we have the processes in place to, once again, maximize the upside of that technology.
Yeah, before handing that over to Regina and Zaira, I'm just going to end our poll. We've had plenty of people respond. So the biggest concern most people have is that disinformation, misinformation point. I'm quite surprised that social engineering wasn't higher up, and privacy violations also seem to not be a huge concern for individuals. I think when I've read various people run similar kind of polls, that misinformation part is the top concern for many. I'm going to launch our second poll as we're kind of talking about policy and how organizations use AI. So for our audience, our organization has a clear AI use policy in place. So yes, we have one. No, and we're not working on one. We are working on one, or if you don't know, you don't know. Regina, any additional comments on that shadow AI, shadow IT point, and obviously our poll results there?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as Mary kind of hit on, I think it comes down to culture of the organization. And I think it's the same issue with shadow IT. I think this new kind of wave of AI tools is a really good opportunity for security teams to build that relationship with the rest of the business. I think most people in the industry are by nature techie and quite into trying new tech. So it's a really good excuse to kind of jump in and get your hands dirty with new things. Obviously, where possible, get the enterprise license so that you can kind of allow people to play with a kind of platform that you can moderate and that you can control a bit. But I realize that's not in the budget for a lot of organizations, especially kind of ad hoc without planning in advance. So I've said this loads of times if you've heard me speak before, but I worked in a place before where the kind of very first day on the job, we were told to be a security team that says yes to things. And I think that now that's more important than ever. if the only option is to let people use free versions of things, get a policy in place and teach people. Everyone, this is one of the really rare things that non-techie people are excited about and are jumping into as well. And so I think it's a really wasted opportunity if we don't kind of harness that and speak to people about how to use it safely, educate them about what the dangers are, and kind of put those guardrails in place. If you can't implement a formal policy, if you're in a company that's kind of too bureaucratic to get there, work with people one-on-one. You know that sales and marketing are going to be using it to write bids and they're going to be using it to write collateral. Work with them and kind of take that on yourself and reach out across the business. I think it's absolutely happening, and to kind of bury our heads in the sand and say we'll just block the domains is absolutely not going to work in this instance.
I think, Dan, didn't you say in our preparation call for this, what is in America, one of the states has blocked the use of generative AI?
Yeah, they have. The state of Maine, they call it a pause. They don't want to say, ban, but yes, and quite a few organizations as well. And by the way, I totally 100% agree with Regina that, I was one of the early ones, been in this industry a long time, who said, we got to get to yes. I almost got fired for being against Wi-Fi 20 years ago. So, I mean, and that literally led to a whole different perspective. And, you got to get to yes. And, in the cloud and IoT and bring your own device to work. I'm totally in the you got to get to yes camp. So the challenge is, how do you do that in a secure way?
Great, thank you. And Zaira, a lot of points to unpack there, but any comments on anything that has been raised?
Yeah, I think these are all wonderful points. I want to come back to some basics. Let's separate AI from LLM discussion, because when we're talking about the adoption of LLMs in an organization, we have to go ahead and adjust our AI policies to that. But if I'm looking at Fortune 2000s and above, they've already been using AI in their data pipelines, and from their development, deployment to runtime operations, we have already seen in application development this play in the DevSecOps cycle as well. For those enterprises, they've had to accommodate to AI. So that's not only the source code, but also the synthetic or real data that's being utilized, the sanitizing of that data, and then further all of the risks that could occur during runtime. So if you ask data ops professional, they say, we've been doing this. We've been doing this for more than a decade already for what you call AI. Let's call that just machine learning. And now that we're talking about LLM models, we're talking about these inherent ethical risks, privacy-oriented risks. We're talking about seeing efficiency at scale with I would say, more advanced AI models. So then that brings up the question, how do we regulate that? But shadow AI has been occurring for as long as security has been divorced from the data ops lifecycle. And shadow AI has been occurring for as long as SEC has not been in the DevOps cycle. So I just want to make a point there that application security and data security are must-have integrations into the development and operation cycle. That to begin with, that just period. Now, to add, I want to talk to the poll. I think that the misinformation and the disinformation worry is a testament to how human we all are. So we are so concerned about trusting things blindly. We're not so still concerned. What I'm reading from this poll is the proximity of cyber threats to us individually. That's what I'm seeing. I can see that people feel that their personhood is more right now attacked by GPT or any other LLM model based on a test against their critical analysis capabilities and their intelligence rather than the security of self. So that goes to show where we kind of are societally, and also that goes to show what people are interacting with every day in their news cycle or otherwise. I can see that that's the primary standout point from this poll. I think that if we didn't see such an aggressive adoption of LLM models, and further, if we didn't see such an aggressive adoption into several, be it bias, pro or positive or negative propaganda models, we wouldn't see something like this. Instead, what we'd probably see is otherwise people being concerned about the rise in phishing attacks, or the rise in vishing, even if they want to go very specific. So I'm not surprised, but I'm also somewhat surprised that people don't see the weight of social engineering yet, given the audience of such talks. Right? It's not a widely general audience. It's a very focused security audience. So that's what surprises me.
Yeah, no, I agree with that point, actually, that given our cybersecurity audience, that is the top concern. And I have a stat on the phishing emails side of things. So /Next, they were one of the companies that kind of first, their threat intelligence team first discovered WormGPT, so a malicious version of ChatGPT that threat actors were using. They released their state of phishing report not long ago, and it saw that there was, from their pool of data, obviously it's always from a specific pool of data, there was 1,265% surge in malicious phishing emails since Q4 2022. So they attributed a lot of that to the efficiencies brought by generative AI to the creation of social engineering campaigns. Handing it over to anyone else that would like to comment on that first set of poll results. Dan?
Just real quick, I want to just respond to one thing that Zyra just mentioned. I agree with you. We've been dealing with these issues for a while, but where I slightly disagree with you, so some disagreement in the panel is okay, is that this is, a year ago, it's been about a year. Gen AI has sucked all the oxygen out of the room in conversations in 2023. And so this is going to be, I do an end of the year blog, and what's the top topic this year in cybersecurity? It's going to be Gen AI, because Gen AI is what everybody's talking about. Any conversation, you want to talk about identity management, you want to talk about SOCs, you want to talk about anything with CISOs around the world, it ends up going to Gen AI. And so my point is, and the title of my CSO magazine article was for this was that is that Gen AI has brought shadow IT on steroids. Is it right now, the moment we're in today? Yes, we've faced these issues in the past, and yes, we faced AI issues and LLM issues and other issues in the past. But in the last 12 months, since Gen AI was really born-ish, maybe they really born last 6-8 months, it's become the top topic. And as far as the poll results, I agree with your comments on that. I think this is clearly a security audience, and I think that's where we have that discussion. I am a bit surprised that as many no, 30% no, and we are not working on one. That seems a bit high to me.
Yeah, so that's on our a poll that's currently running on whether organizations have a clear AI use policy. 30%, 31%, it's changing as it's live, have said that they are not working on one. That might be personally they're not working on one, maybe their organization is. I guess we've kind of covered that already, but Mary, is there any comment you'd have on that one?
Oh, it doesn't really surprise me, because when I attended the SACA conference, I asked that question in terms of who's working on a policy, and most people aren't. So I'm not sure if the rationale for why. Are people looking for more guidance, or is it more the governance model in terms of how do you move forward with the policy, or just a lack of understanding on the technology, and do you want to embrace the risks? So it kind of goes back to like strategic risk management. How do you harness this technology in terms of the LMs for good versus for minimizing the downside? So there is a lack of readiness. And I think that's why it's great that we're having these webinars or these conferences to share information. So hopefully people are more comfortable moving forward with these policies or giving guidance. But I found here in Canada, most people are actually embracing shadow AI. So in terms of paying for their own ChatGPT 4 license and using that for work, even though it's not sanctioned. So I think that's, to me, it's problematic. Just once again, it's been 12 months, and why are we not in a stronger position of readiness with policy guidance and training?
Do you think there's an issue with people not wanting to stifle innovation and kind of a path forward? Because obviously this generative AI and LLMs, it's really like in its hype cycle, it's really at the peak. So is it people are afraid to be like, hang on, let's slow down, let's write a policy? Do you think that's coming into it?
I think it goes back to the risk culture. And I feel like in some sectors, it's more risk adverse. So let's take our time and write, or maybe someone else will come up with the solution. So I kind of feel it's a bit of your head in the sand and you're waiting for something to happen, but it's kind of too late at this point. People are embracing the technology. You're able to purchase a monthly subscription to ChatGPT for $20 a month. It's very accessible, very friendly. There's plenty of YouTube videos to pick up on how to write effective prompts. So I don't understand a bit more about the risk averse or the slowness or even having a pause, because it's moving forward. And I think for me, like even I'm an accountant. Part of that is new, new skills for my profession, especially in terms of auditing algorithms and how do I provide assurance on these AI systems and doing risk-based assessment. So I think part of that is we need to catch up and acknowledge the situation. And maybe that's more of a culture issue, like having an open conversation and improving the relationship with IT and cybersecurity. I think even with cybersecurity, more soft skills in terms of understanding the business strategy, how AI can support the value chain, getting to a place of yes. That's something new for cybersecurity compared to my interactions even like 5 years ago, which came from a place of no. So once again, we need to change our mindset, work with the business and look at options. But at the same time, it's more soft skills and having that collaboration in place.
And someone's commented to say they think it comes down to organizations doing themselves a disservice by having to enforce an ill-advised or poorly written policy after something happens. So I guess that's Zaira, go ahead.
Perfectly made points, honestly, Larry. Perfectly made points. I want to add, I've seen a lot more momentum on the privacy side. So I've seen privacy take into account the ethics of AI, or this generic idea of it, the generic idea of bias in AI as well. On the security side, though, don't we often in security wait in the discipline for some kind of regulatory or compliance-based guidance to do something? I mean, to create the ISMS that we have as it stands today, we kind of waited for ISO to lead us there, and likewise in the privacy respect. So I will say there are a few things that are going on. OWASP released their AI security and privacy guide, which I think has been quite a helper for a SOC guidance. And then further, for your security engineers, there's the ISO 5338, which is an AI security engineering guide. And then ISO is also in the works for 27090 and 27091, which are AI security and privacy guidance. So those, I don't think they've been released for review yet, but they are in the works. That to say, I think these things kind of in our industry takes an official body saying, this is where I see you going. And then us saying, okay, now we can write down what our policy should state, because otherwise we have to either integrate it into an application security privacy policy, a privacy policy, an endpoint policy, a data or a classification policy. We have to integrate them into those rather than as a standalone. I don't see it as a standalone unless it's integrated into other things first.
I'd just add to that, in terms of the kind of risk management, as Mary said, there is also NIST have released a AI risk management framework. So if you are working on building a policy, that's a really good reference point for kind of looking at how you manage those risks and maybe introducing new risks that you might not be aware of as an organization, just to add to your list.
Dan, anything else to add to the list?
No, I mean, I think those are all great comments. And I think that as far as doing disservice, the comment by Antonio, I would certainly agree that they're doing a disservice if they have to enforce an ill-advised, poorly written policy. But I mean, this topic, I mean, people are equating this, and it'll be interesting to, wish we could fast forward 10 years and look back, right? People are equating Gen AI to, the invention of the internet. I mean, and, major things. I mean, whether or not that's deserved or not, or AI as a whole, what's going to happen over the next couple of years, or, really we're in the first inning of a baseball analogy in the U.S. here, but, at the beginning of a game here, the beginning of early innings of a longer story, right? And so I understand people maybe want to pause and think about this and But I do agree that this is a time where this is happening. People are using it. The technology is being used. I agree with the comment that people are buying their own $20 versions and they're just using it. And so I think the challenge becomes for organizations and for CISOs and a lot of security pros in the office. They want to get to yes. So the CISOs I talk to, nobody wants to be I'm against AI. Nobody wants to be the CISO that was against AI. The challenge that I see out there, and I talk to CISOs, is we didn't see this hurricane coming. This was not on the radar. This was not the meteorologist, the weather department got this wrong. This was not on the list of top issues. Even go back and look, I do a prediction report every year. This was not one of the top predictions in last December, as Gen AI is going to take over the industry and all these different things we're going to talk about. And so I think a lot of people are literally reacting, and it's hard. It's a difficult challenge. And I do think that, all the examples and all of the recommendations you made about NIST and looking at other best practices out there will help. But if people are waiting, they need to act now. You can't keep waiting on this.
Yeah. Anyone want to finish off our conversation about the regulatory aspect of things?
I've got more to say.
Oh, sorry. I think Mary was just jumping in, but was on mute,
sorry.
and then we'll head over to you, Regina.
No, that's fine.
Oh, I was kind of curious about the regulatory debates. So I think in cybersecurity, I'm not sure if we tend to be more reactive, waiting for, we have an event that occur, we do our incident analysis, and we come up with policy. But with the regulatory environment, I'm not sure at what state will the regulation be able to assist. Like, are we waiting for something that may take too long to be in place? And then with the regulatory environment, is with the constant state of change, will it be able to keep up? So I guess my questions, especially with responsible AI, are we able to take a leadership role internally as a company versus waiting for a regulatory environment? So I'm just wondering about the chicken and egg type situation. Like, do we move first, saying that we'll adhere to the code of ethics, responsible AI will take a leadership role while we wait for the regulatory environment to catch up? And then also skills. So given the fact this is brand new, this was not on our radar 12 months ago, how do we train staff internally? Do we need to have our own AI group, or how do we bring up key skill sets to guide an organization to be more AI driven, have the proper risk management, and also making sure that our AI systems are being developed securely? So like, what immediate steps can we take, or as an organization, to move forward? So I guess those are my questions.
No, that's great. And it gives me the opportunity to point our audience towards one of the articles I've listed in the attachments, which is based on the ISACA survey, which is how AI is kind of set to create demand for digital trust professionals, as they kind of term it, like people that need to be trained up on how to write these policies, how to manage that side of things. So if anyone wants to take a look, that's there for you. Sorry, Regina, I cut you off there, but over to you now.
I just was going to say, in terms of the kind of regulation thing, and then I can jump onto some of the points that Mary raised quickly. We've seen, so the EU have talked about, I think it was last year or 2 years ago, they introduced their kind of initial draft of their AI safety bill. The Biden administration issued an executive order on it a couple of weeks ago. And I just, in terms of that kind of chicken and egg, which comes first, I think we have historically seen the kind of policy writers and government officials maybe on the back foot when it comes to a lot of technology issues. You could see in specifically, I'm picking on, sorry to the Americans on the call, I'm picking on Biden's order, because a lot of the stuff that they kind of called out, that, look, we need to monitor anyone foreign who's registering a model that's big enough to kind of compute, that's big enough to kind of train these models. I think they're focusing on the wrong things. I think a lot of the regulatory stuff is still maybe looking at the wrong places, and they don't quite understand the challenge, and they don't understand maybe the potential. So this is maybe a call more to people who are on the call, wherever you're from. Certainly in the UK, our government does a lot of open consultations where they're kind of drafting bills. Keep an eye out for that stuff and get involved and contribute to it if it's an area that you work in and if it's an area that you're knowledgeable in, because this is absolutely a place where our government and our policymakers don't know enough. Regulation has to come, and a lot of companies will wait until there is regulation that kind of forces their hand. But the problem with that is a lot of times the regulation isn't really going to be fit for purpose, and it's not going to match people's day-to-day use of things. So kind of a call to action, try and get involved in that as early as possible and kind of submit your thoughts so that there can be as much knowledge behind those decisions as possible.
Yeah, I see a lot of nods there as well. So a lot of agreement. So in the last 20 minutes of our discussion, well, 15 minutes before we get to some final thoughts, I wanted to pivot the conversation to how can cybersecurity teams practically use LLMs, AI? Because I think with the hype cycle that we're in, we've also had a lot of cybersecurity vendors that are saying, adding LLMs and AI, and you just have to walk around any of the big exhibitions to kind of see that. So I've got a poll asking the audience, but Dan, perhaps you could start us off. How can we practically use AI-enabled tools, and what should we be wary of in our own cybersecurity teams?
Yeah, so as I walked around RSA, I think where I first met Beth in out in California in back in, it was April, right? And just really every vendor talking about getting to that single pane of glass, being able to bring in lots of data and being able to siphon that. Now, I don't know if we're ever really going to get to one pane of glass. We've been talking about this for over 20 years, and I don't know that it's ever really going to happen, but bringing all the different feeds in, all the different data, different vendors have different solutions. I'm not going to start going through the different, Google, Microsoft, a variety of other security vendors, have different solutions that are outstanding that I think I was very impressed with a lot of the tools, and they do great work. They certainly, we keep talking about higher end tools, smarter tools that can help with the shortage of cybersecurity professionals that are in the industry. Everyone's talking about the need for talent, how the shortage of cyber professionals and certified cyber professionals, and the ability of these tool sets to help teams in security operations centers, et cetera. So I certainly think that's talking to your major vendors, looking at what's going on right now with monitoring, management, real-time response, being able to respond quickly to real-time threats, being able to correlate threats across a wide variety of tool sets. I think we're really seeing a new generation of tools that are emerging that are really exciting. And so it certainly needs to be a part of that. I certainly encourage people to talk to the vendors, ask them, the same kind of questions we're asking about the data sets they're using, how that applies, how's my data being used, asking how the development is happening, vulnerabilities in the process of what they're developing. And there's a lot of the same questions, the great questions that Zaira was going over and really, need to be asked to the vendor community. But I think it is definitely a sea change in cybersecurity management as far as cyber threats and cyber response.
Thanks. Zaira, nodding head there, so I'll head over to you.
Oh, so great points. This is an intelligent panel, so I really appreciate everyone's inputs, because I mean, it leaves me with little to say, just like nodding, like yes, absolutely that. I think I'm going to separate this into two buckets. One, what vendors could do, or the scrutiny that rather security teams can apply to vendors. I mean, it's very clear I work with a vendor, so what I want to do. So that means a lot to me. So putting the vendor perspective aside, for security teams, you can already use ChatGPT in a good number of ways. Now that you have that custom assistant with, by the way, look at a lot of the threat that's going to pose to with the API calls, this unlimited API calls by AI, be wary. That's just not safe for the future of application security. But nevertheless, if you are going to use an assistant and you feel pretty assured in it, what you can do is work on triage, vulnerability triage. Already with ChatGPT, you can work on root cause analysis, digging into IOCs. In your SOC, you can work on remediation guidance. A lot of times there's a bit of a bottleneck between IT ops and SecOps when it's time to go ahead and ship off the prioritized vulnerabilities with recommendations. We don't want to throw it on IT ops hands to go ahead and figure out how to do things. So you can use ChatGPT to help you understand what remediation guidance is out there. And further threat intelligence can be sourced in such a way. Reporting can be done as well. If you need to speak to your CISO, if you need to speak to your board, I'm sure that there's plenty of guidance provided when you have the right prompts. And furthermore, for policy management and regulatory compliance, you can, by way of the latest model, or if you're able to work with a good prompt, look at data beyond the model allowance and see what is good hygiene for my policy. Is it clear? Is it written well? Is it written for the audience? Plenty of things your security team can already do to maximize efficiency with ChatGPT or Bard, be it. Now, for the what to look out for in a vendor, scrutinize the terms and understand what kind of efficiency is being promoted versus what kind of efficiency can actually be gained. If you're looking at a vendor, that's where your POC is most helpful. During your trial period of a tool, scrutinize what machine learning means to that tool, and further look at their supply chain risks in your vendor questionnaire. Please don't use an old vendor questionnaire and throw that at a vendor with some antiquated terms in there. I've seen that far too often in my career. It's really boring. There are some controls there that shouldn't even be there anymore. So add some scrutiny into your vendor questionnaire and see what comes back. You don't have to expect anything as of yet, just see what comes back. And that's when you get a good idea of not just what they're able to do by trialing the tool and asking the right questions, but also what their security measures are, because supply chain attacks are what you should be wary of.
Great, thank you. Regina, what's your perspective on how we can, as a cybersecurity community, actually use AI for good?
Yeah, I mean, as Zara said, I think I'll probably echo most of her points. There's a lot of vendors. Every time you go to a trade show, everything is powered by AI or AI enabled. And I just echo her thoughts in terms of you really need to find out what that means, because a lot of times people are calling it AI and it's really complex if-then statements. It's not kind of advanced generative learning or kind of giving you an additional insight into things. I think there's a load of really useful tools to have it supplement your skills, but I've seen a lot of people kind of rush to say, oh, I had a vendor recently do a presentation and they'd replaced all their level 1 SOC analysts and everything was AI kind of triaged. It's not good enough for that. And I think if you're relying on that protecting your organization, you only need to kind of look at the outputs of it and look at the false positives that it's flagging and look at the things that it's missing. I wouldn't trust that in my organization. I certainly wouldn't trust that from a vendor. It's absolutely at the point where it can be really valuable alongside human triage and human input, and it can absolutely expedite things that people are doing. The other thing I'd kind of push back in terms of vendors is, again, I saw a presentation recently where they were saying, oh, all of our SOC analysts use it to kind of threat hunt, and they use it to look for additional IOCs, and they also use it to draft an email. So it writes the queries for them, and they use it to draft an email, which they then send to the customer. And I wonder if their monthly payment for their SOC has gone down, because I don't know what their SOC analysts are doing if everything is going through this tool. So I just, there's a lot of hype and everyone is kind of slapping the AI label on everything. And there's absolutely really good use cases for it, but I just say kind of use caution when you're evaluating it. Don't be, if you're anything like me, kind of new shiny things are so exciting. Don't be tempted into kind of, oh, it says it's AI, so it's going to be better. There's a lot of kind of the hallucinations are a really big issue, but even just getting things kind of minutely wrong can have catastrophic effects if you're relying on that for something kind of being triaged or being flagged or not. So I just really would suggest caution. I'm not saying stay away from it. I'm not saying it's not useful for an organization, but really evaluate what your use case is and why you're using it. The other thing I just kind of mention is it's been mentioned before, there's a million different tools out there. I've seen people kind of pigeonhole everything into ChatGPT or everything into Bard or whatever. Every tool has its pros and cons, and there's a load of tools that are built for very specific things, especially now that ChatGPT has kind of given people the ability to fork off and build their own. There's really, really specific ones which can be great for your use case. So really understand, don't kind of take the tool and then find a problem to solve for it. Really understand what your needs are and find something that fits it. Don't just kind of slap AI on it because you can.
Yeah, no, some really good advice there. And hopefully if our audience attend conferences and exhibitions in the future, they can kind of bear those kind of scrutinizing questions in mind. Mary, what's your thoughts on this, or anything to add to the comments our panel has made?
Third-party risk management. So I am an accountant. I do internal audit. So I hear about investing in cybersecurity tools with AI capabilities right away. Like this requires a broader discussion. So if you're looking at making these investments, who else are you engaging from IT in terms of the IT architecture? Are you able to integrate this technology within your technology stack and also understand the data needs? And then when I think about third-party risk management, you may need to change your procurement process. So understand what are your requirements, what are you trying to achieve? Because part of that'll help with the vendor assessment. And then how do you assess the vendor's capabilities? And so in terms of their model, in terms of is it transparent, their ability to support, and is it this vendor someone you want to be in a long-term relationship with? So how do you manage the contract? And then also once this technology is deployed, what services will you provide internally versus working through this vendor? So I think to me it's a broader conversation. So you need to probably rejig several of your risk management processes to support this direction, but involve others in the conversation, whether it's legal services, procurement, or other IT teams. Because once again, we want to make sure that once again, we're meeting, once again, the solution is integrated, but we're addressing what the problem is. And overall, it's a net benefit to the organization.
Great, thanks. And Dan, just because you were the first to respond, so any comments on what our panel has said?
No, I love it. I mean, it's a great list. I mean, you guys are awesome. I totally agree. We need to think about when claims are made, test but verify. You can trust but verify and test but verify, both. You need to really think in terms of show me the things you're saying that this is going to be so much better. And I think your points around that, Regina, were excellent. So thank you. I don't know if you want to jump to that question response around cyber professionals, because I do think that that's an important topic, because I hear a lot of people say, will it replace people? I think the comments made just now kind of talk about that. We're not maybe ready for that frontline SOC analyst to be replaced yet. I do, people talk about, tight budgets and this is going to get us there. I do think we're heading in that direction where we'll be helpful. But I do think there's still a shortage, and it talks about layoffs, I don't know if you want to read that question there or not, Beth. And that,
Yeah, so someone's just commented saying that obviously there's a lack of cybersecurity professionals, but recently a lot of companies are reducing their IT budgets, which often encompasses their cybersecurity budgets. Are companies really taking this seriously?
Exactly. So I think the challenge is I still am seeing a lot of vacancies. I mean, yes, they want, it's a whole other topic for another conference, right? About cyber careers and professionals and getting experience. So you can actually say, I've got experience. People do want people who have some hands-on experience. So get that in internships, et cetera. But I do think this is going to be a very interesting journey over the next few years. What skill sets will AI be good at? And then what, new skill sets? We all need to be constant lifelong learners and upgrading our skill sets and growing in our knowledge of this industry and what the tools can do and what they can't do and how we can use them effectively. So, I'd love to hear the thoughts of the other panelists on that, but I do think there's still a shortage of cyber pros. Organizations, some are laying off, but a lot of others are still hiring. So certainly in the US, the job market is still pretty hot.
Yeah, well, we have just 5 minutes left of this session now. So that is a discussion possibly for another day. But what I would like to do is offer our guests the opportunity to either respond to that or provide some closing remarks on some of the discussion we've had today. So Mary, perhaps I could begin with yourself.
Oh, I'm looking forward to reading a new book by Dr. Fei Li in terms of the worlds I see. So I think for me, it's just more gaining knowledge, hearing different perspectives. And I found with her book, she said AI is promising nothing. It's the people who are promising or not promising. AI is a piece of software. It's made by people, deployed by people, and governed by people. We cannot pretend AI is a bunch of math equations and that's it. And in her view, AI is just a tool. And like other tools, our relationship with it can be messy. So tools are invented by and large to deliver good, but there are unintended consequences, and we need to understand and mitigate their risk as well. So once again, it's all about the people. So we're in this position. It's great that we're having these conversations, learning from each other, but we have to work together as a community to move forward to once again maximize the upside of the potential and minimize the downside.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that, Mary. Regina?
Yeah, in terms, I'll come to the question quickly and then closing thoughts. In terms of kind of layoffs, and I think this is always a cyclical thing, and you see it in the market. One company does it, and then the board of their competitor goes, well, they've just had record profits and have 100 fewer people than us, so we're going to lay off 100 people. So it will come in swings and roundabouts. It always does. So I know there's been a lot of people who have been affected by that. We saw the same thing with cloud security when that we still have a massive shortage of people who have really good cloud security skills. If you have been affected by layoffs, AI security is going to be kind of a huge, huge, huge in demand career and industry if it's not already. So use the opportunity. For me, kind of prompt injections, as Zara mentioned earlier, and kind of data poisoning and protecting against that, those are huge concerns for me. So if you're in the position where you're wondering if your skills are still going to be relevant, that's absolutely the kind of path I'd go down, because I think that those are not going to go away anytime soon. In terms of kind of closing thoughts, I guess I'd just say, I think that I think a lot of people, me personally, I don't like change and I don't like new things. And I was very kind of, ChatGPT is very overhyped and everyone's jumping on this bandwagon. And I very quickly have jumped on the bandwagon as well. So I just encourage other people, this is a really big opportunity for us to learn really cool new things and learn new skills. And it brings a huge amount of opportunity as well as threats. So I think being really reasonable about the threats that we're facing with those. I think kind of going to the extreme, the sky is falling and AI is this existential crisis that we're facing, it's not helping anybody. So I think being really reasonable and practical about what we're facing now, what we're facing in the future, and how to kind of counter those and how to come up against those, I think is the way to go forward. So yeah, just kind of encourage anyone who was like me and kind of a bit dismissive of it is to jump on the bandwagon. It's fun with all the hype around us.
Yeah, I think we're all on the bandwagon now, aren't we?
I know. We've all
Zyra, some closing thoughts from yourself?
Yeah, sure. And I'll focus this on security specifically. Do not be deterred by the budgetary issues and what you can do in cybersecurity. Either way we cut it, we are a risk management function, and what we're teaching the organization is about probabilities. And oftentimes we're not taken so seriously until something bad occurs. Your objective, regardless of what happens, is to keep on track and to prevent that, to be proactive and preventative in a sense. So with that being said, just to the point in conversation, how can cybersecurity be built into AI? I encourage you in your organization, if you are utilizing AI already, to take away some of those menial tasks. You're not taking away a whole role, you're refocusing intelligence. So refocus your human intelligence on other actions. Maybe, for instance, looking at the attack surface that AI development is creating, from source data leaks that can happen during development to the whole pipeline of storage to access, movement, and protection of data. refocus on data security there. Go visit your DevSecOps cycle and go look at how maybe perhaps you can look at adversarial attack resistance against code or applications. It is a big topic. I know Eric Barenthal in Gartner, he talks about it a lot. So if you happen to have a Gartner subscription in your enterprise, that's just where I've read that information, or go look on Medium. You'll probably find some bit about that, adversarial attack resistance. Refocus all of your skills in cybersecurity because they're worthy and they can grow in this space, because this space is in need of you. You're in need of knowledge to upskill, but they're in need of you. So from data prep, development to deployment and runtime, security deserves its space. Take the time you're gaining from utilizing AI to protecting AI. And the very last point I'll add here is that I have a platform that I run called Inixis for cybersecurity leaders. So I'm looking at CISOs, I'm looking at CIOs. Please do join it because I'm running a report called The State of AI Regulations in Cybersecurity, which I will be producing for publication in the next 2 months. And you'll go over each country's regulation, action plan, strategy, which I'll include in there, including all links and a nice data sheet for you to refer to so that you can keep your eyes peeled. And I'll walk you through all of the hard work.
Great. Thanks, Ira. Dan, quickly, just as we have now, just run over a little bit, but really worthwhile comments there.
I'll be quick. Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Beth, for having me. Thanks, everyone on the panel. I just would say, number one, take action. I mean, we talked at the panel to people who have no policy or, I totally agree. We got to get to yes. If you're a cybersecurity professional, CISO, leader, even if you're just an analyst, you've got to engage. I totally agree with the thoughts earlier around engaging the business. You have to have the conversation. But I also say to cyber pros, you've got to have a visibility into what's currently happening in your enterprise now. I mean, there's a lot of talk about, we want to do this and we want to do that, but understand what's really going on today in your environment. And that's why I, wrote that article around shadow IT, but also you can go to Lorman on Cybersecurity, which is my blog for Government Technology Magazine. I talk about AI a lot in there, but I think the most important thing is, you got to jump in, get in the pool. I mean, you're going to get wet, but the bottom line is you really need to engage. This is the topic that everybody wants to talk about. Utilize it as an enabler and utilize it to talk about almost anything in cybersecurity today because everybody wants to talk about this. So take advantage of the opportunity. And again, thanks so much for having me.
No, that's great. Thank you so much, everyone. So I think jump in the pool, hop on the bandwagon, get involved there. But no, with that, I am going to unfortunately have to draw this conversation to a close. I'm sure we could have spoke for another hour or so. But thank you to my wonderful panel of speakers, some really insightful advice there for our audience. Thank you for taking part in the polls. I think we got quite a good insight into what people are thinking there. And for those of you staying with us during the online summit, please join us in 15 minutes for our next session on navigating identity and access management challenges in a digital world. So another interesting topic to dive into. But with that, thank you, everyone. And I look forward to speaking to everyone again very soon. Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.